This is an I Read Comic Books Minisode. I am today's host, Brian Murray. Joining me today, the wonderful Kara Shamborski.
Hey.
And, of course, Mike Rappin.
Hello.
And today we're going to talk a little bit about Kanan, the Star Wars character. What his deal is, what he's done, what he's been in. We're going to focus on the comics to begin with, but I can't promise that we're not going to go ranging far and wide throughout the Star Wars canon. So this is just kind of a general spoiler warning. If you haven't watched Rebels or read the comics or the books that Kanan has been in, there's a good chance you're going to get some spoilers in here. So this is just kind of your blanket warning. So
it's Kanan, not Kanan. I wasn't really sure how to pronounce this guy's name when we started.
Kanan Jarrus.
Okay, cool.
Kanan Jarrus, a.k.a. Caleb Doom.
Yes. Spoilers. He's got a different name.
I'm like really, like I jumped right into this comic. I had no idea like what to expect. And where did this comic book come from? Is this like an original thing that then bled into other mediums, or is it something else?
All right. So you know how in the films Star Wars Episodes 2 and Star Wars Episodes 3, this ending of Episode 2 is like, begun, the Clone Wars have. And the start of Episode 3 is basically you're seeing like the end of those Clone Wars. And all this stuff in the middle, you miss the actual war. So They made the animated show Star Wars The Clone Wars. The first 5 seasons aired on Cartoon Network, and the 6th and final season, although not so final anymore from the latest reports, was on Netflix. And those 6 seasons encapsulated like what happened during the Clone Wars. And then Episode 3 happens, and Order 66 is executed, and the Jedi are basically no more. And then the television show Star Wars Rebels comes out, which takes place before Episode 4, A New Hope. And in that show, in the first season, we realize there are still some Jedi kicking around, but they're not quite Jedi. One of those dudes is Kanan Jarrus, and you're like, how did this dude avoid Order 66? And and he goes into this whole like, I'm not a real Jedi thing, because he was actually a Padawan at the time of the Order's execution, so he never matriculated to Jedi Knight. So he's got this whole complex about not being a real Jedi, quote unquote, but like, dude, you have a lightsaber, you are a Jedi. And so a lot of the story arc of Rebels is his kind of coming to terms of who he is in the context of the Force, and like having a Padawan learner of his own. And the comic is our look at some of his past, and it was published at a time where in Rebels we didn't really know a whole lot about his past, because that stuff didn't really come into play until like the 4th season of the show.
Okay.
So you, as a reader with none of this context, just
Totally.
dove right into this comic book. What did you think?
Okay, so for one, I remember when this book came out, and I remember being not really plugged into Star Wars that much. Like, I know I did some like extensive wiki reading, you know, through college and stuff about the extended universe, and then of course it all gets rebooted. So like, I didn't know who this character was. I thought that he was just going to be like an extended universe character from the previous Star Wars canon that they're trying to reintroduce into this new canon because he was beloved or something like that. But yeah, jumping right in, I didn't know what to expect. I was like, oh, okay, this seems like... I knew that this kind of takes place right around the Order 66 thing. I didn't know when that was going to happen, or because they talk about the Clone Wars. And the first issue ends with, like, execute Order 66. I lost my mind reading it, because I thought, like, cool, we're going to get this story about this kid who's going to barely survive Order 66, and he's going to become something. And the first issue opens on him as like an adultish, or I don't know, like 21 is my guess. He's reflecting back on his past, and I was like, hell yeah, hell to the yeah. And then the following issues, there's no flash back to the future. Instead, it's all in the past. I was so on board. It was one of the easiest Star Wars books I've ever read. Hands down. Like, and this is coming, like, you and Brian gave me no heads up other than maybe you should read volume 1 of this. That's about it. And I was like, okay, I'll try it. I got no qualms with trying a Star Wars book at this point. And I was so blown away. Like, what a cool fucking idea. That's all I can say.
It's very cool. And I really enjoyed those parts in the quote-unquote present where it's adult Caleb or adult Kanan. Because we get to see some of the other cast of Rebels who I really enjoy.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, like, I thought I recognized a couple of those other people from just, like, bits and pieces I've seen on the internet about Rebels. I wasn't sure if those were the same people, but okay. That's really cool. That's really cool. I need to go watch that show.
They got an updated, like, comic booky look, and, like, the part that I obviously most liked about the Kanan, the Last Padawan comic miniseries is those flash forwards, because you do get to see him interact with his fellow crew members of the Ghost, which is their ship, in a kind of more mature way than you see on the show, which is a kids program. So in the comic, it was like a glimpse of some of the more subtle hints at his thing with the captain, Hera Syndulla.
His deep burning passion for Hera Syndulla.
Yes, they're so in love, and it hurts me so much. It's like the whole... Well, so, Mike, the whole thing was like, in the Star Wars book A New Dawn, which Brian and I devoured because Kanan, and also Hera, and so much Star Wars, is all like basically Hera and Kanan's meet cute in book form. And they're just like, basically the entire book is him being so in love with her, he like doesn't know how to cope. He's just like this stupid boy in love with this girl who's got a rebellion to fight, god damn it. And it's like they make it very clear in this book that he's just like kind of following her because he's like head over heels for her from the get-go. So it was really nice to see a little bit more of that in the comic than you do on the show.
Interesting.
Yeah, the show is too afraid of its own feelings to give them the love story they deserve.
Until season 4, and then all of a sudden they're like, hey, that thing you've been wondering about, let's talk about it in depth, but also you might cry. I'm like, why?
So, do you think that could potentially tie back to the fact that he had, like, this very powerful master before? Like, the master Jedi that he was, apprenticing under, she was in, like, a similar position? Could that be part of it? Like, he's in love with his... Like, he's got this Oedipal complex, kind of?
All right, Freud, let's...
I mean, I just threw out my, like, I don't know, based on your descriptions.
No.
It's a good point. There's definitely parallels that could be drawn between Depa Billaba and Hera Syndulla.
Okay, thank you for saying that name.
Yeah.
Because I did not know how to pronounce that name.
I didn't either until they said it on the show in season 4 when they started digging into his past.
Yeah.
The Jedi master that he was working under, what was her name? What's her full name, if you could say it for us, Brian?
Depa Billaba.
Thank you. Okay.
Whom, prior to this, I had only known from her picture in the DK Star Wars Episode 1 Visual Dictionary as one of the masters in the Jedi Council. And as a child reading this book, any Jedi who happened to be a woman was cause for massive hype. And my friends and I, like, memorized all of the names of, like, all of the female Jedi characters because there's so few of them. Mm-hmm. So... when people are like, oh, episode 7, there's like a girl Jedi, I'm like, I know, it's so great. It's so great. But yeah, so it was really a treat for me personally to see actual character anything about Depa Billaba besides just like, here is a Jedi who is a woman and she sits here and that's all we know about her is her name. And I'm like, I just want some more. And boy, did we get it in this book.
And this book and this character, I guess, then fits quite nicely then into the Star Wars canon. Like it's not like a forced fit, like forced in kind of character or like story. It actually like plays up with other things consistently, from what I'm understanding.
As far as I can tell, I mean, I have not read or consumed every piece of media that's come out.
The thing that I like about the Rebels media, about Star Wars Rebels, about the books and the comics that tie into that show, is that it feels to me like a very nice subtle expansion of stuff that we already know and are familiar with. It's like Mike, how you were saying at the end of the first issue of this Kanan comic, you were like, oh shit, Order 66 is happening. Like you already know what's going on in the context of like the major touchstones of these character lives. You're just seeing what's happening through the lens of someone who isn't a Skywalker. And I really like that.
Right.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that this book gives us a chance to look at we get to look at the events of Order 66 from the perspective of somebody who is a Jedi and who is, intimately related with what's happening, but survives it. So we get to really see like what impact Order 66 has on a kid that age. Because I think he's what, like 10 or 12 maybe?
Yeah, something like that.
Well, Mike, what did you think of what he ended up doing after the order was executed and he was on the run?
Yeah, so it felt to me like now reflecting on it, it feels like a classic trope, but I don't know if it's a trope. I don't know. The way that it's something that I was very comfortable with reading in that he was a character that had a lot of skills, but he was thrown into a world that he really couldn't use any of those skills for. And so it's one of those things that like proves that yes, he was a Padawan, which means that he was on this track to become this great Jedi Knight. He wasn't there yet. So he has these. He is very talented. It's just he has to learn new talents in order to survive. Which is why seeing him working with the captain of the ship, whose name is escaping me.
Hera. The other captain. Sorry, the past captain.
Well, working with he was a green guy. There's like Tapaz, and then there was another guy, and I kept getting them confused because they look so similar. But seeing him basically finding a natural fit of like, okay, instead of going to my lightsaber, I should go to my blaster. Instead of acting this way, I should act another way. And he just was looking for another person to train him. Like he had the thing that all younger kids have when they find that they want to do something, that he has this unbelievable ability to learn and adapt to his situation. So despite the hardships that he felt like after immediately escaping those two clone troopers that I almost felt bad for at the end, but I'll get to that. But like seeing him like adapt and grow and learn and become like this rogue-ish type of character, like it really worked. I don't know if I'm answering your question. I just really like this book. It was so fucking easy to read. I honestly can't get over like how quickly I went through this book, because it was just like every issue was so clean and it was so well paced. Like what a book, honestly. Such an impressive book in a world where like I already have this huge attachment, and then being able to see like the other side of things. I always find, there's these giant moments in Star Wars like Execute Order 66 or the Clone Wars that are just glossed over because we don't need movies about them. But the fact that there are books like this that exist that fill in those gaps or allow us to get a little bit of glimpse into other angles of the story that isn't just a Skywalker story really, really intrigues me. Which I can understand why people are drawn to these types of books in the first place. They just want to know more about Star Wars that isn't just about the same 5 or 6 characters. Yeah, that's my long-winded answer for that.
Yeah, no, I see what you mean. There's definitely parallels to like the idea of like a story of a young nobleman whose family is killed, so he has to go on the run and blend in, and he can't act like a noble anymore. There's definitely echoes of that story in Kanan's journey.
Well, Brian, what did you think while reading this book, since you had been watching Rebels all along and had prior knowledge of this character?
I was really excited to see how the Kanan that we saw on the show kind of came to be, because you're absolutely on point talking about how he has this I'm not a real Jedi thing. It's a kind of a complex he has to deal with in the show. And so it was very interesting to see the idea that I am not a Jedi being drilled into him as almost like a survival mechanism in the comic.
Absolutely. And I like the note that Mike pointed out where he trains himself to reach for the blaster instead of the lightsaber, and then you start seeing kind of the reverse of that happening in the show as he becomes more comfortable in his role as a mentor. And it's just such an interesting moment that they didn't have to include in the comic, but I think they made for a richer character arc by doing that across the different media.
Yeah, and one of my favorite things about Kanan is that he's the perfect example of how somebody can be a light side force user without being a Jedi necessarily, because he has the Jedi tradition in his history, but he doesn't hold on to, like, a Jedi must never be angry, a Jedi must not feel passion. Like, he eschews all of those things and is still a good guy.
Yeah, he's definitely not a monk, as we saw in A New Dawn, the book that featured him, which, like, the whole, like, first half of it is him just constantly being like, yeah, I love the ladies, I love getting drunk, I love doing dangerous things and, like, racing speeders and shit. And I'm just like, oh, he's such a bro.
Yeah, like,
such a bro.
Getting his freak on is, like, a tertiary concern through the entire book. But that book also gave us Admiral Ray Sloan, who I could also talk about for hours on end.
Yeah, they're doing so many interesting things with these kind of peripheral characters. I feel like I'm in some kind of, like, secret club. Like, I see the whole extra level of Star Wars that's happening because I go out of my way to read the comics and watch the TV shows. I feel like people who are just watching the movies, I'm like, that's fine, but, like, you have no idea that Anakin Skywalker had a Padawan, and you don't know that Han Solo was kind of sort of not maybe married to someone else, and like all of these things where I'm just like, man, Star Wars is so friggin' rad. Why don't people realize this?
It made watching Rogue One very frustrating or irritating for my wife. Kate and I went and saw that, and I kept, like, slapping her leg and being like, "That's Chopper." They mentioned General Syndulla. That's Hera. She's so cool.
I flipped out in the movie theater when that happened. I was watching Rogue One with someone who had never seen a Star Wars movie before, and I was I was basically punching his arm, being like, "They just talked about Hera, or maybe her dad, but I'm pretty sure it's her."
Yeah,
because that was prior to, because Rogue One came out before Hera got made a general in Rebels, so when that first came out, people were like, is that her dad? Is that her? Did she get promoted? That makes sense. This takes place after Rebels. And it's just like, man, whoever's in charge of orchestrating the Star Wars like canon changes is really freaking good at their job. Give that person a raise.
There's a handful of people that are just, like, strapped to a table, and their job is to recite everything, like, Minority Report style about the Star Wars universe.
Just
like
Pablo Hidalgo strapped to a table in a basement somewhere.
I did look up the character that I couldn't think of. His name is Janice Casimir. He flies the Casimir because he's so full of himself. I love that. Like, that was such a fun little bit in that book where he's got these ships and they're all named after him. But yeah, so, like, I guess this book continues after the first volume, right? It's not just one singular volume. There's more story about Kanan that's coming out. Do you guys know if this is still actively being released?
I thought it was a mini-series.
Yeah, it's certainly not still ongoing. I think there were 2 volumes.
Okay. Yeah, I just looked it up. Yeah, there are issues that are coming out as of March 12, I think was the last issue number 10 or 12 or something like that. I don't know. No, I'm wrong. Maybe I'm looking at an uploader website. Ignore me. Ignore me.
I was about to freak out. Like, what do you mean no one told me there was more Kanan?
Yeah.
I think it did go up to issue 12 though.
Okay.
From what I'm seeing. So, I mean, that's great because now I have more to look forward to and keep reading.
Yeah, if I'm remembering correctly, I think the second volume is more modern, quote unquote, modern day. Like, it's more Rebels era than it is flashback type stuff.
Oh my god, gotcha. I have to go back and read.
I could be totally wrong. That could just be like the fan fiction that I was writing in my head while I was reading it. But
give me more Hera and give it to me now.
Yeah, I just looked it up on Amazon. You know, it looks like there is a second volume that goes through issue 12 that continues to explore the early days of Kanan. So
I need it.
If you haven't found it, you should go find it. But yeah, so I guess the more about this character, you know, like there's what 4 or 5 seasons of Rebels that exist then?
4.
Like they're 4, okay. And Kanan is like a regular character. Like, I guess, how much more extra media do you guys want around this? I'm really curious. Like, are you looking for like a Rebels comic? Are you looking for like I don't know. Like, I know they're doing more Clone Wars this year or something, or the next year or something like that.
Oh, did you see the teaser trailer? It looks incredible.
Yeah,
I haven't seen it.
Looks real good.
It looks so good. So I really enjoyed... Clone Wars is a show that and I'm intentionally talking about Clone Wars, not Rebels. Clone Wars was a show that I got into only after like a million people were like, how are you not watching this? And I was like, I don't know. And the first season,
because the animation looks bad.
It's just not great. But you could like, I'm a completist, so I watch the whole thing. But if you like skip ahead and start watching, and then by the time you get to season 6, you're like, how does no one know what this is? It's so good. And Rebels, I feel like since they had, it was basically the same people who worked on Clone Wars for the most part, so they were able to jump right in and know what they were doing and what they wanted to be doing. And it was, for me, a really interesting look at things that were happening prior to A New Hope. And like that kind of setup of the rebellion, you're starting to see little disparate cells from across the galaxy start to come together. In the later seasons, some character favorites from Clone Wars pop up. So it's like everything's tied together really seamlessly. And I'm going to try to say this in the most spoiler-free way possible, because the ending of the Rebels series was just so crazy and unexpected, and they like do a flash forward for the last like few minutes to show you how some of these characters end up, and that flash forward takes place like right after Return of the Jedi, as far as I remember.
I think so, yeah.
And that flash forward made me like scream at my laptop. I was like, what do you mean? That's all you're going to tell me? I need more. So like, I would really like to see more of what they're doing during the original trilogy and immediately following, because some of the characters, it seems like, do have really interesting storylines that I desperately want to be explored a little bit more.
Yeah, and it's super interesting to think about, like, what was Hera doing during the Battle of Endor? Or, like, where was Sabine during all of this?
Oh my god. Just so many things. Like, her hair changed again. I'm just like, so much has happened and I want to know more. So, in short, yes, I would love more stuff. And I was thinking, like, what would these characters look like if they decided to make a movie? Since like everything seems to be on the table for a Star Wars film now. I'm just like, how would this be introduced to the people who have only seen the movies? How would you even go about doing it? And Kanan's kind of an obvious choice, because Star Wars in the public mind is almost immediately matched with the whole Jedi lightsaber concept. So I'm like, okay. They would probably make it about Kanan or his Padawan, and if they made it about the Padawan, they would have to mention Kanan at some point. So I'm just kind of like, bring Kanan to the big screen.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's interesting because Star Wars, they have so many gaps between the movies, which I don't know if that was Lucas's intent or whatever, but like there's a lot that they can potentially farm on. I know that's what Dark Horse did for years, right? Like a lot of the stuff that they did as far as the comics were concerned was just like, all right, this takes place between Empire and Jedi, and it turns out that Luke's got a wife now, and like she's a super dark Jedi, but like blah blah blah. And I mean, I don't know anything about Mara Jade. I don't. We just
I was going to say, first of all, her name is Mara Jade Skywalker.
I know. I know at least enough to get by. And then as soon as anyone asks me any deeper questions, I clam up and disappear into the darkness. But
just send me a frantic text next time.
Yeah.
I have all of the EU knowledge like locked away in my brain still.
Right. Yeah, well, that's actually really interesting because it you know, like I said, I've done some like wiki reading, but I haven't actually read any of the older comics or books. How do you guys feel about like the way that those stories have been dealt with, or just completely erased in some cases, or they'll take pieces and reintroduce them back into the new Star Wars universe?
I think it absolutely needed to happen, and I'm glad that it did.
That they wiped it?
Yeah.
Wow.
There was a lot going on.
Okay.
It got to the point, you're talking about like between the movies, there's like 5 years worth of stuff that Luke did between A New Hope and Empire, and it's like 2 years between films or something like that. Like,
right.
And they didn't have the same, like, the story group guiding everything in the old days, so all these Star Wars novels would kind of like half contradict each other, and it was a mess. It's better now.
When I think of the what might have beens, I just think of how in the original extended universe canon, Han and Leia had twins who were both force sensitive, and one of them ended up on the light side and one of them ended up on the dark side, and they had to fight one another. And I just thought that was like the most cliche thing that could have possibly happened. So I am glad that they took a slightly more, I don't want to say interesting route, but the sudden patricide of Han Solo was, I don't think that was something anyone really saw coming. So
yeah,
except for Harrison Ford, who'd been begging for it since the 80s.
Oh man, well at least he like went through it and went out with a blaze of glory.
Yeah. You mentioned they're twins. I would give anything to have Jaina Solo back. I mean, she was the cool, like, force-sensitive mechanic daughter of Han and Leia.
I only really knew about the twins, like, sort of briefly through, I think it was, like, the Jedi Academy kids novels or something like that. And it, like, blew my mind that there was more Star Wars than just the movies. I was like, What do you mean? There are comics and books, and I could just be sitting here reading forever. I got the one Star Wars novel that I've ever purchased was a Darth Maul prequel.
Maul Shadowhunter?
Maybe?
Is that the one where there's a woman, like a young woman who's like a Padawan and she's chasing Darth Maul and they fight in the Undercity?
Yes, that one. Oh my god,
that book is so good.
Oh my god, thank you. Somebody else has read this thing. Yes. It's like the one Star Wars book that I got, and I got it because I was like, man, Darth Maul was the coolest. So spoilers,
Same.
They bring him back in Clone Wars and he pops up in Rebels.
Yeah,
and like when that happened, I was like, man, this is so much better than him just dying.
Yeah,
absolutely. So, Brian, have you read that book as well?
I'm sure I did, because for a while there, I was reading everything Star Wars that came out between like
right.
1997 and 2009.
That's a lot of Star Wars, Brian.
Yeah,
it was so much.
I remember, like, Mike mentioned Mara Jade earlier, and I only really know her from one issue of Star Wars Tales, which was basically like a series of one-shots that Dark Horse was doing. It was like each issue would be a different, like, self-contained Star Wars story, which was very interesting for me because it's like you didn't really need to know anything. You could just kind of dive right in. And they had, in the first, like, collected trade, they had a story about Mara Jade where they just, like, briefly say that she's the Emperor's hand and she's trying to, like, consolidate some power or, like, find someone. But I just remember her, like, infiltrating this rebel base with such ease and with, like they had given her this head-to-toe leather situation that was very reminiscent of 90s Catwoman. And she kind of like acted that way too. Like, now that I'm thinking of it, there's basically a panel where she's like crouched over a rebel soldier, I think in exactly the same way that Catwoman crouches over Batman in the movie at one point.
Oh my goodness.
And it was just like such a suggestive situation, and I was just like, this woman is badass, and you have my attention, and we're just gonna, and she just like was in total control of the whole situation. And then I didn't realize that she was maybe it was Wikipedia or like pre-Wikipedia internet Star Wars information circulating, where it was like Mara Jade was married to Luke Skywalker, and I was like, what, when, how? She was in other stuff?
Yeah.
I distinctly remember folks in like middle school telling me this, and I was like, Luke Skywalker had a wife? Like, that's how I talked when I was in 7th grade, by the way.
We all did.
Yeah, they had a son named Ben.
Of course they did.
Oh, right.
Which made a lot more sense than Han and Leia naming their kid Ben.
Right.
Yep.
But Han and Leia had a son named Anakin, so what the hell do I know?
Yeah.
There is
his name is Elvis Severus blah blah blah.
Stop it. Get out of here. Leave JK Rowling out of this.
I know, I'm sorry.
It's okay, you're right. It was a terrible naming choice. But you had mentioned things that they kind of brought back and put into the canon in a new way. And that's definitely oh god, what's his face? The blue guy.
Grand Admiral Thrawn.
Thank you. They brought back Thrawn in a real way, and
stupid
it was like,
space Sherlock Holmes.
Like,
well, he's like he's a pretty big fan favorite though, right?
Yeah.
Apparently, he's one of those characters where I feel like I'm supposed to like him because everyone likes him, but I'm just not interested. He's like a less interesting Spock that's a bad guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, his whole thing is that like he's always supposed to be 10 times smarter and 50 steps ahead of everybody else. So it's a lot like reading the original Sherlock books where, Sherlock Holmes knows all the answers all the time. And he's always got like his John Watson who's like, gee willikers, Mr. Holmes. Like,
that's a very superficial reading of the original Arthur Conan Doyle short stories, by the way.
It is, I know. But that's all that Thrawn got from it.
You're thinking of the 1940s Basil Rathbone film interpretations of Watson as the doddering sidekick. Watson held his own, which was beautifully captured in the more modern Sherlock BBC series. Anyway, yes.
You are correct. But yeah, Thrawn always has a sidekick Imperial who is there to just be amazed by how brilliant Thrawn is. And I think that's why a lot of people like it, because they like to project themselves onto Thrawn and be like, yes, I am also the super genius who is also an excellent martial artist and an art critic and
and I've got a really cool dog that will kill you. So
yeah, Thrawn is a piece of work.
So
I've only read a little bit of the book, but I know they released the comic. Maybe that's what you were going to get into, Kara.
No, I was going to say, Thrawn is actually an interesting character to bring up, because you were saying earlier how you weren't sure if Kanan was a character from the old extended universe that they brought into this new one. Mm-hmm. And Thrawn is a character that they brought back from the old extended universe, and he actually showed up first in Star Wars Rebels as a counterpoint to this Rebel Cell, and then because see above apparent fan favorite, now he's got a couple novels coming out and they're integrating him a little more visibly, but he did first show up in Rebels just like Kanan. He's just a returning character as opposed to an original character.
It's almost like Disney needs a seeding ground for characters to make sure they're going to take off. So they need an animated show that maybe isn't getting as much attention as the movies, so they could be let's try this character out, and if it does well, then we'll throw it into the main Star Wars universe, or the comics. I don't know. I'm just throwing ideas out here.
If that were true, they would have Ahsoka Tano in her own film by now. I'm just saying.
Is that the Twi'lek girl, or Twi'lek?
Oh my god, I thought you said Twilight for a minute, and I was like, Mike.
Oh, this is now a Twilight episode of the show?
Yeah, is it Twi'lek or Twi'lek? I always wanted to say Twi'lek.
I don't know.
We're deferring to you, Brian. You're the master of all these Star Wars languages.
A different alien race, though.
Yeah, she's because she's got horns on top and on bottom. Twi'leks just have the Leku.
Oh, okay.
I can't believe I'm drawing a blank on what her species is.
I'm gonna Google her right now. You guys keep talking.
But yeah, I mean, she's very good. She annoyed the crap out of me when I first started watching the Clone Wars.
I think everyone.
Yeah, but they figured out what to do with her character after about halfway through season 2, and then she became my favorite.
Gotcha.
She is a Togruta.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say, one of the things I'm terrified of is the idea of them trying to make movies, because, I want to see Ahsoka Tano on the big screen, but if it's anybody other than Ashley Eckstein's voice coming out of that character, it's going to kill me. I'm going to die in the theater.
Petition to have Ashley Eckstein actually play Ahsoka Tano on the big screen.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be satisfied with anybody else. And I don't know if Ashley Eckstein is a screen actor or not, but...
You clearly did not see her as Alana's sidekick on That's So Raven on the Disney Channel in the early 2000s.
That is a deep cut. And no, I didn't. I was too busy protecting my fragile masculinity to watch That's So Raven during that time period. So,
oh my god, I'm gonna double check that it was actually her, because I think I made that. Let's see. Oh, yep, she was Muffy on That's So Raven.
Oh wow,
she's been on a lot of stuff. I'm looking right now. She's on a lot of television, a lot of like voiceovers, obviously, but she's done some actual like on-screen acting.
Thank goodness. Let's get her in the headpiece. Let's get her on screen.
Oh, she was Alicia in Sydney White. I love that movie. Yeah, she can, like, she's fine. She can do it. They can green screen her and it'll be fine.
Fingers crossed. Yeah, so I guess outside of this, now I'm kind of like asking like a broader question, like are there any other like EU things you guys want to see brought back into Star Wars, or are you kind of just banking on Disney to keep kind of rolling out these characters that you love in the new canon just in general? That's a big question. I realize
that is a really big question.
I would like to see them take the idea of the X-Wing books and do those. They don't need to bring any of the characters or any of the stories, but I would love to see like a Top Gun style series of movies focused around these X-Wing jockeys.
I love that.
Yeah, like give Wedge Antilles his own show for a while.
Right. I mean, it kind of begs the question on, will Disney do like an anthology series? I know that they're talking about, I don't know if it's in production or not. There's like a live action Jedi show that's supposed to come out. I don't know.
I think that's a fan thing, isn't it?
Oh, it might be a fan thing.
Because I know somebody was just filming like a fan movie in Michigan not too long ago.
Right, I remember hearing about that.
Which I don't know how they haven't been sued off the face of the planet yet, but
right.
Do you know how Amazon has that like really hardcore like Middle Earth Lord of the Rings show in production, or like they're talking about it and they got the rights and they're like definitely doing it? That seems like a thing that other properties might be waiting to see how it goes before diving in. Like that seems like a thing where if that kind of thing does well, then Disney would be like, maybe we could do that with Star Wars, or like do that with our Marvel TV stuff, but a little more hardcore.
Mm-hmm. Could be interesting.
Yeah.
Just got to find the right studio to do it, unless Disney just wants to produce it themselves. The problem is that if it ends up on something like ABC or whatever their other one is called, like Friends First or Family House, or I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't remember what they changed ABC Family to.
Freeform.
Freeform, thank you. Friends First. I was close. I would be worried that it would be too like daytime TV-ish to actually work. Like I feel like shows on those channels don't have huge production budgets. But who knows? Maybe they can do a low-budget Star Wars thing and only show lightsabers once a season.
I don't know. They did that with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and that was just a continuously disappointing thing for me.
True.
On the other hand, Cloak and Dagger on Freeform, very good show.
That's what I've heard.
I have been told to watch that, so that's on my list. Is that streaming anywhere, or is it just on Freeform?
I think it's just on Freeform.
My friend in the UK told me to watch that, and she was like, it's on Amazon, but that might just be a regional thing. All right. It's so hard living in the golden age of nerddom and television.
I know.
You guys are just giving me crap. Mike was giving me crap about talking about signing up for DC's thing when that comes out.
Oh, yeah, I was. It would almost be funny to hear if there would be like some sort of Star Wars thing like that would come out, but like $5 a month on top of some other subscription where you can get access to Star Wars specific things. Like I wouldn't put it past Disney to do something like that.
Well, Disney is supposed to, like according to press releases, supposed to be rolling out their devoted streaming service at some point in the next year.
Right.
And if they do that, like, if they have their movies and the Marvel stuff and the Star Wars stuff, like, of course I'm going to give them all the money to have access to those things. But,
Right.
and maybe, like, they're setting that up, and then from there they can do more original, content that's just specifically for their dedicated streaming platform, and they would have less of the constraints that cable television or network television does.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, a quick Google search and a couple Google searches later did warrant an answer on this live action thing. Supposedly, Lucasfilm is firing on all cylinders, according to this article, and they're popping out approximately $10 million per episode for a 10-part story that Jon Favreau is in control of, quote unquote, and they're going to start shooting in October. So it looks like a miniseries, live action.
Nice.
So who knows? I don't know what the focus is going to be, but it's coming in October.
I don't care. Miniseries format makes me feel much more confident than question mark ongoing, because you're forced to do tighter storytelling from the get-go.
Same here. Yeah, I like that. Anyways, well, thanks for making me read Kanan. I'm happy to read more Star Wars, and I'm glad to have a reason to read it other than just
Us making
buying
you.
it and have it. Well, no, I mean, like, I'm glad that I read it, like, in general, because I don't think I would have ever gotten around to it. Like, I love the Poe Dameron series, but it's kind of on the back burner for me. I love the Star Wars series, but it's on the back burner. And I love a good reason to try out a book that people are saying is very good, and this one definitely, like, solidified the fact that, you know, the thing that I should have known from the get-go, which was that Marvel and Disney aren't messing around with making good Star Wars comics. Like, they are putting top-notch storytelling together with good creative teams to make sure that they create good comics that people will love. And I at this point haven't really read a Star Wars book that I was so, like, that I, like, dropped, you know? I dropped Poe Dameron because it was $3.99 an issue, and no one needs that in their life when you can, you know, probably find it on sale or something like that, or, you know, get collected editions for much cheaper.
Dude,
So
I paid $5.99 for Infinity Wars #1 this week.
that's what I'm saying. Like, you know, a lot of these books cost a lot of money, but if you can get your hands on them, like, they are very high quality. You know, when it comes to art and story, I think that they aren't slacking at all, and I hope people are getting paid well for making these books.
Yeah,
because they're very good.
And if you don't have the cash to run out and buy them, Star Wars comics are usually a pretty easy find at your local library.
Usually,
Yeah, my library did not have the Kanan miniseries, which devastated me, but they had all the regular Star Wars and Darth Vader series.
well, that's good. At least you can recommend that to someone to get those books started, because those are both very good, solid stories as well.
Absolutely.
Well, cool. I don't know if you guys have any other final thoughts on this. I feel like I've said all that I could say about Kanan without actually reading the rest of this book or this series.
No, I'm glad that we had an opportunity to talk about it as a means of discussing the larger Star Wars universe, now that Disney is making a concentrated effort to make it a broad collection of stories that can integrate across different media.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, if we don't end it, I'm just going to keep going. And
I was going to say, we haven't even really gotten to into Star Wars episodes 7 and 8 yet. That's a whole other topic, I think.
I could talk about Star Wars with anyone, anytime.
Right.
I guess
right.
our next thing, Mike, is you should consider watching Clone Wars and Rebels.
Yeah, I feel like I've got to now. I feel like and it's on Netflix, right?
Clone Wars is. I don't think Rebels is streaming anywhere yet.
Okay. Well, if anything, I need to get started with Clone Wars, and there's like 5 seasons of that, or 6 seasons. You guys said
there's 6 seasons of Clone Wars, and Rebels. I was watching on the Disney XD website. If you log in with a cable provider, they let you stream all of it.
Okay. Cool.
Yep.
Well, I'll get started on Clone Wars at least. There's a lot of TV there.
Start at the beginning. Yeah, no,
You got it.
it's good. We can have another chat about it with some Clone Wars comics.
But
Oh, boy.
don't watch the movie though.
Yeah, just skip the
Okay.
movie.
Okay. Cool.
So bad.
Yeah.
This has been an I Read Comic Books Minisode.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you guys were, like I said, really excited to have read this book. Now, I definitely am going to go get #2 and probably read it tonight. But yeah, so thank you to everyone for listening. Thanks Brian and Kara for forcing me into reading some Star Wars books. You can follow us all on Twitter. You can follow Brian at BrianHead. You can follow Kara at KaraZam. You can follow me on Twitter at Mike Rappin. And you can follow the show at IRCB Podcast, where we post all sorts of stuff and surveys and cool polls. And make sure to follow that for future things that are coming up. You can go to the store on our website at ircbpodcast.com. You can buy a zine. You can check out our pronunciation guide. You can buy pins and stickers if you're interested in that kind of stuff. And, thanks to Xander for editing the show. Thanks to Infinity Shred for music. And until next time, may the Force be with you. Thank you.
Always.
And also with you.
I always want to say that.
I know.